Good evening. My name is Jason Moore, and this is my practitioner client role play. Good afternoon, Adrian. I'm glad you were able to come in today. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you that this is a confidential space. Excuse me. And our time today is focused on what feels most important to you right now.
Mhm.
Um, How are you feeling coming into the session?
Honestly, a little tired. I've been feeling overwhelmed lately, especially with other people's stuff.
Okay. Yeah, and that sounds heavy. Now, Adrian, when you say other people's stuff, can you tell me a bit more about that? Like, what does that look like for you?
I just feel like everyone comes to me with their problems and I don't know how to stop.
Okay. So you're often in the role of listening and supporting others. And by the end, are you feeling drained? Did I get that right?
Yeah, and I feel guilty if I don't help.
Okay. And that sounds strong. Adrian, um, what do you notice that happens inside of you when you think about stepping back or not helping?
I worry that I'm being selfish.
Okay. Selfish and excuse me. And it sounds like being there for others matters deeply to you. And at the same time, it's costing you something emotionally. When you hear the word boundaries, what comes to mind?
Hmm. Being mean, saying no.
Being mean and saying no.
Hmm.
Okay. All right, Adrian, that's a really common association with the word boundary. And Adrian, what if boundaries weren't about pushing people away, but they were about, excuse me, protecting your energy. So this way you could show up more intentionally.
I never thought of it like that.
Yes, and Adrian, if your energy wasn't constantly depleted,
Mhm.
what do you imagine might change for you?
I probably feel less tense, I guess.
Okay, and that's a important insight. So right now, it sounds like helping feels more like a obligation than a choice.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, Adrian, I have a question. Would you be open to what do you say about practicing what we could say a setting a small boundary? What that may sound like?
I guess. I mean, it makes me nervous.
Okay, well that makes perfect sense. And Adrian, what I want you to imagine if a friend calls late at night, what is one sentence you could say that respects both you and your friend?
I care about you, but I can't talk right now.
Okay, and that's very clear and compassionate. And how did that feel saying that out loud?
Uncomfortable, but we're leaving.
Relieving, and Adrian, that relief matters. Boundaries, they often feel uncomfortable before they feel natural. And I have another question, Adrian. On a scale from 1 to 10, how overwhelmed do you feel most weeks?
Mm, an 8?
An 8?
Mhm.
Wow, and that's pretty high. And where would you like to be?
A 4?
A 4. All right,
Yeah.
well, Adrian, that really gives us a direction. And what's what's one step you feel ready to try this week?
Letting go calls go to voicemail after a certain time.
Okay, letting calls go to voicemail after a certain time. I think that's a great idea. I think, even if you do this in the evening if if you want to. I would say like maybe after supper, this way you can maybe wind down, maybe catch up on some good shows, do a little meditation.
Mhm.
And I think that, could give some time back to yourself. So, Adrian, that really sounds realistic and intentional. So let's work on that for this time and we'll touch base. And before we end, I want to reflect also what I'm hearing. You care deeply about others, and you're beginning to recognize how over responsibility has been affecting you. So, Adrian, today you practice on setting a boundary, which you did wonderful at, and you identified one change you're willing to try. So, we're going to work on trying, letting those calls go to voicemail after a certain time. You figure which time is the most convenient for you and just start with there. Just remember, do one day at a time, give yourself some grace. Um, how does that summary feel?
Pretty accurate. Mm.
Accurate? All right. And Adrian, I really want to thank you today, for being so open. We'll continue building on this. How about you and we reconnect, let's say 2 weeks, same time. Would that work for you?
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Perfect. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get that scheduled. I'll send you out a link. And do you have any questions for me?
Not at the moment, no.
All right, Adrian. Well, it was a pleasure again speaking with you, and we'll be speaking soon.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
As I reflect on this session I had with Adrian, one of the main things that stand out to me is how important it was to slow down the pace and stay present with the client instead of moving quickly into problem solving. Going into the session, I was intentional about focusing on engagement and creating a space where the client felt safe exploring their experiences with boundaries and over responsibility. Earlier in the session, I used open-ended questions and reflective listening to help the client feel heard and understood rather than correcting or reframing too quickly. I stayed with their perspective and allowed them to describe how supporting others have been emotionally draining. This approach helped build rapport and allowed the client to openly discuss feelings of guilt, resentment, and exhaustion without feeling judged. From a assessment standpoint, I believe I was able to identify the core concern driving the client's stress, difficulty setting emotional boundaries, and an internal belief that they are responsible for others' emotions. By reflecting patterns back to the client and asking clarifying questions, I help them begin to recognize how these beliefs were impacting their well being and contributing to a burnout. During the intervention phase, I focused on matching the client's readiness for change. Instead of encouraging major behavioral shifts, I introduced small, manageable steps, such as practicing simple boundary statement. This felt important because pushing too much change too quickly could have increased anxiety or resistance. Practicing a boundary out loud was especially effective. It allowed the client to notice both discomfort and relief at the same time. The moment reinforced the idea that boundaries could feel uncomfortable while still being healthy and necessary. Throughout the session, I was mindful of maintaining professional boundaries myself. I avoided self-disclosure and kept the focused on clients' experiences and values. This helped model appropriate boundaries while reinforcing that the session was centered on the client's needs and not my own reactions. Evaluation was integrated throughout this session rather than saved for the end. I regularly checked in with the client about what felt helpful and used scaling questions to assess overwhelm and readiness. This allowed the session to remain collaborative and flexible while still being goal oriented. One area for growth I noticed is allowing more silence. While I used reflective listening effectively, there were moments where I could have allowed additional quiet space for the client to process their thoughts more deeply. This is something I want to continue practicing as silence can often support insight. Another area for improvement is time awareness. While exploration is important, it could become more efficient in linking insights back to the goals earlier in the session. With more experience, I hope to balance depth and structure more confidently. Overall, this role play reinforced for me that effective social work is not about fixing problems, but about supporting awareness, anatomy, and intentional change. This session strengthened my understandings of how boundary work supports client dignity and long-term growth. Moving forward, I plan to continue developing my skills in reflective listening, boundary-focused interventions, and ongoing evaluation to support ethical, client-centered practice. Thank you.